Alright, so I'll give you the little rundown on what you can expect. Looked up a couple things. So you're doing it a little bit differently when it comes to like my whole interview process. So like I talked with Stan Baker first, and I applied like a year ago. Had like a basic conversation with him just about what you'll probably be interviewing with, or interviewing for, whenever you talk to Jordan. Um, but I expected it's probably going to be the same sort of stuff. And like whenever I was unemployed, they all ask the same questions, So with Jordan, it'll be the same questions that Jody will end up asking you, like Lord willing that, you get to talk to Jody. He's the vice president. But anyways, what you can expect is the first question almost every time that like one of these guys is meeting you or like interviewing you is it's going to be why do you want to leave like your current company, and my whole explanation was because of like that one job where Brian told me to lie to like law enforcement in order to get onto a job site. So I had said, I worded it, I was like, I felt like my integrity was, being hurt because I was pretty much just being told to lie. And, it's a small company, and there was no opportunity really for advancement. And that's what I would recommend you say whenever he asks, why do you want to leave your current company? You've been there for 7 years, and you can mention like you felt like you were stuck. Doing labor, because I know I definitely felt that way. And, paired with the fact that, I was told to lie, I didn't elaborate too much whenever I was talking to them about it. Like, you don't want to make it sound like you're dogging on Clean Air, because you already know that. But they'll always ask you that first and foremost, why do you want to leave? So I'd recommend you answer in that way. Like I said, small company, you have aspirations to do much, much bigger things than just being, a laborer topping out at manager, because the way spec works is they don't hire like outside people for like the big roles most of the time. Most of the time you start inside sales, you eventually find your way into like whatever you want, and like in a lot of the conversations we have, it was like you don't envision yourself being like a purchasing manager or like a taper design salesman, in the roofing industry. Like, it sort of just happens. You come to find out that like you enjoy doing commercial stuff instead of like residential mostly, and like through time, building a portfolio at the counter, you meet a lot of commercial people and you're like, well, dang, I can go and I can sell a ton of commercial. Because, and one like key point that I would mention was, I want to make the company money. I want to make my family more money, so I can support my kids. That's like, mention your family, mention your wife, mention your kids. I don't know how many kids you got running around now in your house, but, you got something to provide for, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking for family people because it's a family business. Started with Mel Stevenson, and the CEO is Doug Stevenson, his son. And then his son, Douglas, is like, he's up there. So, anyways, just mention that, you want to be a part of a family business, you want to grow with them. You have aspirations to, potentially run a branch, to do outside sales, learn enough about the business in order to build something off of it, and that's just what's most important. Because what I was also going to say is, like, after they ask you, why you want to leave, they're going to say, well, why spec? And it's a valid question, and you can sort of just tie it into all that, saying like, yeah, like I've done a lot of research on you guys. Me that works in the Round Rock location, and you see how they treat their people, and it's just a family place, and it seems like they're one of the leading distributors, besides ABC and SRS and all that. But they're a leading distributor that you have belief in, and like that's why I said like do your research on there. They're one of the most reputable distributors in like South, I guess, the southern parts of America, because they really only stick to red states and stuff. But just acknowledge that it took a lot for Mel to build such a large company at the way that it has been, because it's not a super old company. It's massive now. We're nearly doing $1 billion in sales, which is immense compared to that, and you don't want to miss out on a good opportunity to grow with the company. The other question that they'll ask you is, like what other places have you applied to? And you can fluff it up or whatever, you can be honest and say, I haven't necessarily, I'm still anxious and like looking for the right opportunity. Because while you're trying to see if they're a good fit, they're trying to see if you're a good fit. And really all that they're looking for is just, are you personable enough in order to represent the face of spec? Because in your position, you'd be sitting at the counter, and people are going to come in and they don't want to just be like sold to. They want you to actually remember their name. When they walk in the door, you already know what company they work for, you already know their first name, and you can expedite the whole thing. And to the point where like, I'm just now starting to get there after a month. I notice the people that walk in, and then they'll come up to me as opposed to the other two counter people. So it's just little things like that where, they want you to actually, they want to believe, at that interview that you could be personable enough in order to do that. And you can tie that into like communicating with contractors in the field, and they're asking about you, they're asking for you to do their jobs because they like you so much. Because I get that all the time. I get people calling on the phone that are like, hey, is Lauren available? Because they enjoy the way that Lauren treats them, So you want to tie all these things into your work experience, and it's not hard because we were face to face with customers all the time. So they already know that like you've represented another company for 7 years, and and at the end of the day, the interview is all about you. Talk about all the accomplishments, all the times where, like someone got hurt and then you have to, take control of the situation, because you will run into like situations where like what I was going to segue into is like whenever a customer is upset about something and you have to explain how you're going to solve it, in that, you were the point of contact when it came to things that were wrong. Because I've had stuff like that happen today. It wasn't with me, but you just have to know that like, at the end of the day, we're responsible, being the leads of like our industries, that you're head honcho pretty much. And segueing into distribution would be a good fit for you, because you want to be in a dynamic environment like how it was in the flooring industry, because you're meeting tons of different people, tons of different personalities. You don't know how their day's going, and you just have to be as charismatic and as responsible as you can be, doing your job. So those are like the key things that they're just going to ask you about. They want to know how you're going to respond to certain things that happen, and none of it you have to lie about. It's just really easy. And don't be afraid, like if they ask like if you ask like a hard-hitting question, be like, that's a good question, let me think about one of the times that like something like that happened. Like it's not like a test whenever they're calling you. I mean, like, yes, they're judging you based on your response, but don't feel like you need to I mean, I'm only saying this because you said you panicked or something like that whenever you first called them, and like, yeah, I was nervous too. But, after interviewing a few times, like, it sort of just gets easier. But, just emphasize that it's a good opportunity and that you want to grow with them. That's, at the end of the day, that's all they want to know. Like, riffing and all that, all the materials and whatnot can be taught, but they can't teach you to have a good attitude. And that's the difference between all of that. I've covered most of like what they asked me. They'll probably ask you like if you understand like what the role is, and like I've already told you most of it, just based on what I've said. You're not necessarily going out and seeking sales, but you're representing the company the way that it needs to, and then eventually you'll get your own accounts, and then you might want to do something else later on. They don't take like that as like a bad thing. That you're like, I feel like I could, excel in outside sales, but they'll also tell you if you end up talking to Jody, he's going to tell you it's going to take a couple years, to go from inside to outside sales. It's completely different. Completely different. I guess the last thing, just because this is getting long, is I would recommend, like I said over text, you need to write down a couple of questions that you want to ask them. Like it can be super simple. Like what is an inside salesperson's day normally like? Because it's not just sitting at the counter and like just answering phone calls. There's a lot of like clerical things that we do with receiving shipments and stuff, and staging orders and all that, coordinating with the warehouse whenever walk-ins come in the door. We need to make sure that the warehouse knows that these people are coming to return things. There's a lot that goes into it, but most of these tasks don't take more than like 10-15 minutes, and then you're kind of just filling your time with researching and doing other things like that. And I would recommend you also tell them that like you're researching already on GAF's website, like about how a roof is built, because it's a completely different industry. You just want to emphasize that you're willing to learn, ahead of time, not even just like being taught in the branch, because they appreciate stuff like that. But yeah, come prepared with at least minimum two, maybe three questions. And this will be like your practice run, sort of, with Jordan, because Jordan isn't going to interview you very long. He just wants to know that you're a decent human being. And yours is a little bit different because you're doing it over the phone. I did it on a Zoom call, so I was looking at him like this, and the Zoom call wasn't more than like 10 minutes, and he was like, yeah, Stanton said that you were good, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to schedule an interview with Jody. And Jody will fly private jet from Kansas City to Austin to interview you face to face, because they don't do it like on a Zoom call. They want to lay eyes on you. They want to see that like you are who you say you are. And it's just going to be all the same questions that I just went over. I anticipate Jordan will ask that kind of stuff to you just because he's kind of like first, second line of defense. But you really don't have to worry about any of the questions being different. It's just, why spec? Tell us about yourself. Talk about your family. Talk about the ups and downs of being in the flooring industry and, leading a crew. They'll kind of pick and prod at your resume, so make sure you emphasize, like I was in charge of safety for a number amount of time, whatever. And that you help develop new drivers and whatnot. They'll admire your leadership and stuff like that. But it's all pretty simple at the end of the day, because it's all about you. The interview is literally all about you. So make it that way. Don't feel like you're boasting or anything like that. They just want to know that you aren't like just like a Gabriel or a Jesus, that just applied because they think that they can do sales. Because not everyone can. I mean, you know that. But I wish you luck. You get past Jordan, I can almost guarantee you'll get past Jody. And then you'll get an offer. So let me know if I didn't cover anything. Just text me.